As humans, we don't buy on logic and rationale, we buy on emotion, and stories are the way to create that emotional connection with you as a person, you as a brand.
What those ads sell you is a sense of shared identity with the person using the product rather than the product itself.
Salespeople should be people experts rather than product experts. Sometimes in life, you need to be naive enough to start and stubborn enough to finish.
There you go, showing off the medal. Showing off the medal.
We can be guilty when we're younger of thinking that everyone thinks the same that we do, and the danger is that as a salesperson, you go and sell to people in the way that you want to be sold to, and you're probably going to alienate 80% of the people that you speak to if you go and do that. So everyone's got a story about what they did before they ended up in sales. The key word there is ended, right? They just ended up in sales. So prospect like an optimist, qualify like a pragmatist, and forecast like a pessimist. You've got to be 100% comfortable that there's no safety net, right? There is, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? And it's a scary thing to go and do. It's a very vulnerable thing, I think, to go and do, to start a business.
Such a good frame. We borrowed them from the families. So you have to give them more respect. So you have to take care of them. Oh, that's such a nice frame.
This is why we have.
Your company helps business scale. You mentor them, you provide them with sales services, and you even have sales directors for hire. Why do you think there is a need for sales services? Is it lack of education? Do people find it a difficult skill to learn? Why do you think there's such a gap in the industry?
So I don't think it's a difficult skill to learn. I think it's just not taught. It's not as sales. There's so much business curriculum at school, at college, at university, and sales often doesn't feature in that curriculum. And sales is generally under-taught to people. So for me, sales is quite a simple skill. It takes time to develop and learn, of course, but I just think it's just a lack of education around sales. And for me, I think it's one of the most important business skills that you can have. Most famous entrepreneurs are instinctively quite good salespeople for a multitude of different reasons. And I think for me, there's a lack of access to education certainly for younger people and entrepreneurs around sales.
Do you think sales could somehow enter a national curriculum? I doubt we learn this as uni, but I guess, can we make it more accessible in a way? What do you think?
100%. So even at further education level, you can go and do business studies at university and not learn about sales. Now, for me, that is completely mad, completely mad. And if you think to start a business, you can create an amazing product, you can invent something incredible, but ultimately you have to be able to go and take that to market and take it to market in a way where other people want to consume it. And also as well, sales isn't just about selling products and services to customers. Sales is about selling to investors. Sales is about selling to people that you want to recruit into your business. Sales is about selling your vision to the people that are already in your business. So for me, the skill of sales extends far beyond just generating revenue for your business. But let's be fair, without revenue in a business, you only have a hobby, you don't have a business. So it's really important that we get that bit right too.
Absolutely agree with you on that. I have some statistics here. Nearly 50% of sales leaders believe that a stressful onboarding experience is causing new hires to quit before they even get started, which is insane. And then 87% of training content is typically forgotten within a month. Yeah. How do you go about ensuring your clients get a great onboarding? And why do you think so much of the content taught is simply forgotten?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is that most organizations that have sales teams, when it comes to onboarding their sales teams, the sales training will almost only extend as far as product training. And I think culturally, one of the issues that we have in sales, other than a lack of education at the front end, one of the issues we have in sales is businesses think their salespeople should be product experts. And I think that salespeople should be people experts rather than product experts. And most salespeople, when they're onboarded into a new organization, they will get product training and they'll be taught the ins and outs of whatever that product or whatever that service is. And that will be slightly different for different sectors, obviously, but generally it's here's a load of expertise about the product, now go and sell it. And we don't teach them how to build relationships and how to go and sell and understand people. So I think that's the first issue. I think the second issue is the way in which that training is delivered. So to answer your question on how do you develop, how do you get better retention of knowledge and information? Well, that's to the way to do that is quite simple, really. It's about more engaging training. It's about people actually doing stuff. It's about embedding that learning in, rather than just a one-off. Let's put you in a room for 3 hours with 50 PowerPoint slides, and we're going to go through a load of PowerPoint slides. We're going to teach you a load of theory and a load of kind of like what to go and do, and hope that you're going to go and do it. And then that's the style of training which ultimately like just leaves them. It leaves people. Whereas embedding that over a period of time, being practical in the training, and then mentoring and embedding that over a period of time through actual real life experience on the ground in front of customers, means that learning journey is more likely to stick, and people will actually develop and get better.
Yeah, it's funny how this sort of training that you're mentioning resembles how we're taught at school. So that you have the lecturer gives you a PowerPoint presentation, now go home, study, and that's education.
Yeah.
But that's not, as you said, no one teaches you to build the relationships, because people buy for people that they trust. And I don't trust you just because you have the information. Everyone can have the information, but the thing is, who are you as a person? How can you make me feel comfortable around you? And for example, I love Alex Hormozi. He's my favorite salesman. If I had the money, I would buy anything from him. Not because of the product, because I love the way he sells.
Yes.
It's just phenomenal. So yeah, I see how we're not taught well, and how we copy and mimic the educational system, which has failed, well, since ever. So yeah, why we even copy that? That's a silly one.
I agree. Well, I left school at 16, so I was a byproduct of that education system. It didn't work for me, and I know a lot of other people in business that it didn't work for. And yeah, it's to your point, people buy from people they trust. But again, do enough people actually understand how to build trust and do that in a considered way? And like you say, like with Alex, like the reality, you trust him because he speaks to you, because you're his target audience, right? And you're inspired by the things that he says and the things that he does. But he knows how to communicate with people that are of your demographic, if that makes sense. And because he wants to speak to you. And I think ultimately, as salespeople, of which we all are, by the way. And do you know what's fascinating? Young people are amazing. This is the other issue with the education system, right? Young people, and I'm saying this as a father, young kids are amazing salespeople. They're incredible. They're curious. They don't fear rejection. They ask why. They want to understand things. They don't care how many times you tell them no, they'll keep asking again. And they're amazing salespeople. And I've got my boy's now 12 years old, but when he was 3, 4, 5 years old, the level of curiosity is incredible. And unfortunately, again, I think during people's kind of formal education period, I think some of that curiosity gets squeezed out of them, and we develop this fear of rejection. So we then don't want to ask, because in case we get told no, and we start accepting things because we just get told that's how things are. So just accept what I'm telling you, and don't be curious about it. And I think that a lack of curiosity kills salespeople ultimately. Just taking what you're told on face value is not good. And I think, going back to your point about the education system, I think that it's almost squeezed out of us in some way. We lose that curiosity. We develop a fear of rejection. Society says that's a bad thing. If you get rejected, it's not. But we learn to feel that it is. And yeah, I think if I go back to my 4-year-old self, that was probably when I was the best salesperson I've probably been in my 21 years that I've been on this planet.
Yeah. And then after we finish school, we go about and we open businesses. And then whatever the statistic is, 90% of businesses fail, and we wonder why. On that, what is the biggest single thing the average business gets wrong about sales, in your opinion?
I would say, on average, it's a good question. Generally, there is some nuance to this a little bit. But I think if I was going to pick the number one thing, I think they fail to articulate the problems that their products solve for other people. So they will go about. So, like I say, 8 out of 10 businesses fail inside 5 years. Also, 8 out of 10 businesses are started by people that don't come from a sales background. So most business owners and entrepreneurs experts in their product. They created the product, they made the product, they coded the product, they developed the product, they engineered the product. So they're engineered, coders, developers. Law firms are owned by lawyers, accountancy firms are owned by accountants. So they're experts in the thing that they do. They're technically very competent. And going back to my earlier point about how we train salespeople, we think that technical competency is the thing that helps us go and sell products, and it's not. So what happens is somebody goes and invents something amazing, and they go and talk evangelically about the thing and what it does, but they don't fully understand the problems that they solve for their customers. They don't have enough empathy. Yeah, they don't have enough empathy for their target audience about the problems and the challenges that those people face, and how this product really, really adds value or takes problems away. So that's the main thing for me. They can't turn an amazing invention, essentially, or a great product idea into, when you boil it down, removing pain for customers, because that's what everyone's trying to do most of the time, is avoid pain, and they don't do that well.
Yeah, there is this quote from Hormozi again: sales is helping people make decisions to help themselves,
Yeah.
which I think is so true, because as you said, it's not the product, it's how can you help them solve the problems. So you need to have that empathy, you need to know how to put yourself in their shoes, and you need to understand, you need psychology, you need so many things. I'm curious, who are your favorite salesmen or saleswomen?
So
If you can give me top three, maybe top three.
I'm gonna go top two.
Top two. Let's do
You're
top
quite
two.
narrow. So, and these are going to be different. You're probably expecting me to give people a celebrity name or an influencer that I follow, but I'm not. So the first one is young kids. Young kids are amazing salespeople. From the minute we're born, we learn to how to get the things that we need for ourselves, which is through crying. Typically, if we're hungry, we cry. We get fed. If we need to go to sleep, we cry, and our parents will come and put us to bed. And then we're so curious, and we don't take anything on face value, and we challenge everything, and we ask. My son, when he was younger, could ask for the same chocolate bar 10 times and get 10 no's, and he'd still ask for the 11th time. And then as he got a little bit older, we'd learn to qualify me a little bit better as to what he'd need to do to get the chocolate bar. And then he'd do it, and then kind of go, and then he'd assumptively close me on the chocolate bar. And young kids, particularly like 4 years old, is a peak age, because it's just before we start school. They are amazing salesmen. So anyone listening to this who has young children at home, go and learn from them. But think about, although you might find it annoying as a parent, learn to appreciate how they're engaging with you. They've been amazing salespeople. And then my second favorite salespeople, and I often use this example when people say, what is sales? And I think, for me, sales done well is about service. It's about authenticity. It's about listening and learning. It's about empathy. It's about solving problems. I think whenever I try to explain to people what is great sales, I think great sales is when you go and get amazing service in a restaurant. And just think about this for a minute. When you go and get amazing service in a restaurant, you leave both having spent more money, and you go and tell your friends how amazing it was, because a good service member of that team will make recommendations around food. They will upsell you on additional dishes and side dishes, and you actually thank them for it, and you leave and tell everyone how amazing it was, because that person actually took the time to understand who you are, what you like, what you don't like, and then met those needs and provided an amazing service. You spent more money, and you leave feeling very grateful for it. So for me, some of the best salespeople in the world work, and not in the whole spectrum of hospitality, because I think service levels aren't great, maybe at the lower end of that market. But I think when you go and have a great experience in a restaurant, that's amazing sales.
Yeah. No, you're spot on that. You're spot on. I've been working in hospitality for the last decade of my life, which is my whole adult life. And I've been thinking this, how a good food, which is the product, can bring people in. But if you have bad service, the product itself is not enough. If someone had a terrible experience with a waiter who just wasn't bothered to be there, they're not coming back. They say, oh, the food was so good, but my experience just felt off. I don't want to be there again. So the product itself can initially maybe give you that boost, but it is the customer service and the sales and the people that you have that will keep people coming back. So you're absolutely spot on that.
and actually not only keep people coming back, but actually increase revenue per cover as well in a restaurant by simply kind of upselling often and recommending things, and here's a special which might have some more margin in it as well, and by maintaining good quality of service, and that might mean you get through a bit more wine. So again, it's crazy, isn't it, how through great service you spend more money, you're more grateful for it, you recommend it more, but then when you come out of that arena, we meet a lot of people in business who generally have phobia around trying to upsell or cross-sell a customer because they think that they're being too salesy. And I'm like, no, like if they've got a problem and this fixes it, you've got to start thinking about what is the cost of them not doing this, and what am I costing this person by actually not servicing them properly. But we get so nervous about trying being too salesy, and I think there's a lot of things that we're surrounded by. Hollywood hasn't done a very good job of, kind of they glamorize the dark side of sales and manipulative dark side of sales, and films like Wolf of Wall Street and Boiler Room, all of those sorts of films. That's not sales for me. Breaking the law and defrauding people is not sales. Sales is, like you said, the guys in hospitality when it's good. That is it in its most simple form.
Sure. In that beautiful yellow wall, which I assume is part of your offices, is written changing the way the world perceives sales, right?
Yes.
Which I think is a perfect mission statement, considering sales has this bad reputation, as you were just saying, of being too much in your face, manipulation techniques, deception, and even this ruthless culture that is portrayed in Hollywood of like salespeople trying to get each other. How does healthy sales look like? Although you just said with hospitality, but when it comes maybe to more on the corporate environment where you work, and how is your company helping change these stereotypes?
Yeah, so I guess for me, at 2 or 3 different levels really. So I think sales has an issue, and it has an identity issue because of the things that we talked about earlier with how it's perceived currently, and because of that, a lot of young people don't want to get into sales. It's not an aspirational career choice for young people, and yet all organizations want and need salespeople. There won't be a single business owner listening to this podcast thinking, "Oh yeah, I don't need any more sales." That you get 1 in a million people that they're overloaded with opportunity. But most businesses' route to growth and scale is through scaling out their sales engine within their business. So we need salespeople to want to come into our profession, which means, like, the first thing is we need to treat the ones that we've got well. So I think the sales cultures in organizations are generally quite poor. It's very hire and fire. So we tend to pay and reward salespeople very differently to how we pay and reward other people in our organization. They're often the only people that have any level of variable income. Most other people in a business will have a salary, which is a perfectly respectable salary to pay for their bills and all those sorts of things. Whereas the salespeople, we want to pay them less, and then we want to give them some commission. And they're the only people in a business that get paid in that way. And then we kind of create this whole, through mismanagement and overpromising, we create this culture of like the last day of the month, the last day of the quarter, and let's go and get the deals in. Let's go and pressurize some customers into giving us their revenue now, giving us their cash now, even though it's not the right time for the customer. And we're always chasing the numbers. We're so numbers orientated in sales environments that creates really poor sales cultures. So for me, there's a top-down approach to how the business is led and run, how it realistically expects its sales function to perform and grow and scale. But there's also the bottom-up approach, which is how do we upskill and better develop our salespeople, and also change the perception of sales to them about what it means to actually go and service your customers. What does it mean to go and solve problems for your customers? Empowering salespeople to actually get to a point where they're telling the customer that this isn't right for them, and actually walking away from it and being a good servant to that customer, which is exactly what we should be.
No, that's beautiful, man. That's beautiful, because I think you're speaking some truth into that. And there is also this stereotype that sales attracts cocky alpha male douchebags that are sneaky salesmen. In your experience, is that truth, or is it just a Hollywood fantasy? Because people think like, I don't want to be a salesman because I'm gonna have to work with these people.
Yeah. I think it's less true than it was. I think
Okay.
I think if you go back to the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, I think most salespeople were you had to have the gift of the gab and be very extroverted and be the loudest, most talkative person in the room. I do think it's in that respect it has changed a lot. I think if you most of the great salespeople that I know aren't that person. I do know some people that are like that who have made a career for themselves and they've made it work and they kind of job hop around. They kind of find their limit within their career journey and they kind of get stuck there. You see quite a lot of that. But I think that the really exceptional salespeople, the ones that go on to have amazing careers, either in sales or sales leadership, they are not those personality types. They're very intelligent. They have a lot of common sense. They have really good EQ to understand other people and have true empathy for other human beings. And I think they are the best relationship builders. And I think it's really hard to build relationships in like you said, like it's really hard to get the other person to trust you if you're just a gobby extroverted person who just keeps talking about themselves. To build trust, you need to seek to understand, right, and understand the other person. And I think the greatest salespeople I've ever worked with, ever trained over the last 8 years of Sales Geek, are very intelligent people and relationship builders rather than the sort of gobby, extroverted, traditional stereotype, I guess, that people have of salespeople.
Hmm. You mentioned relationship building, which I think is quite fundamental. But if we are to talk about underrated skills, what is the most underrated skills that separates a good salesperson from a bad one? What do you think?
Well, it's a long list. So, and sometimes you come across people that have all of these things, but I think it varies a little bit depending on the environment. There's obviously there's some very different sales environments. Some sales environments are very transactional, and some of them are you're managing big accounts over a long period of time. Account-based selling is a little bit different, but I think the common trends for me would be having a real thirst for knowledge and understanding again around people. I spent a big chunk of my 20s while I was developing myself and learning about psychology, neuroscience, NLP, like really, really truly understanding how and why people behave the way that they do, and that equipped me both as a salesperson, as a sales leader. So I think true empathy and curiosity as well. And I think the curiosity thing for me is massively important. So bad salespeople hear what they want to hear, right? They might ask the questions, the customer will give an answer. They're so wired to be an optimist that they only hear the good stuff. And let's be fair, to do the front end of sales and prospects, you've got to be an optimist. I think same with entrepreneurs. You have to err on the side of optimism, but that's really dangerous when it comes to qualifying prospects and when it comes to those more mature parts of the sales process, because actually you have to be more pragmatic during that period of time. You have to not just hear the good things that you're listening out for. You have to actually hunt out reasons why people might not buy, rather than just listening for the reasons why they might. So I think being curious and understanding what are you hearing, what aren't you hearing, and then I think having that balance for you. I've always said prospect like an optimist, qualify like a pragmatist, and forecast like a pessimist in sales. And I think if you can get that balance right, if you can get that balance right, you're going to be a better salesperson. You're going to be more respected by your employer as well, and you're going to stop wasting customers' time, because irrespective of what you sell, anyone listening to this, it doesn't matter what products or service you sell, or even if you're in sales directly or indirectly or thinking of going into it, the only commodity you truly have is your time. And the best salespeople, when you boil it all down, as well as having the other things that I've mentioned and some resilience and some drive, when you boil it down, they invest their time more wisely than other people. They manage their sales process so well that they invest the right amount of time in the right opportunities, and they're very quick to stop wasting time on stuff that isn't going to convert just to make themselves feel busy. So learning how to invest time and learning that actually that is the only commodity we all have as human beings is time, and where you spend that time will determine your success.
That's great advice, man. Okay, I want to give you 5 key aspects of what makes a successful business. And if you could please rank them from the least important to the most important, that would be awesome. Yeah, so we have marketing,
Yep.
product,
Yep.
sales,
Yep.
operations and leadership. I'll put this as one. And
Yep.
then company culture. So marketing, product, sales,
Yep.
operations and leadership, and company culture or people.
So at the bottom of that list, I put product.
Interesting.
And I'm saying that because I have firsthand witnessed some very amazing products that are in the graveyard of failed businesses because none of the other 4 things were any good. So for me, I think you can run a success. I actually think that the aspiring entrepreneurs and people that want to start their own business, I actually think they get too hung up on having to have this amazing product, and they wait too long, and they hang on to get this amazing product because they think if they've got an amazing product that everything else will just happen, and that just isn't the case. Equally, I've seen some very successful businesses with pretty me too average products really, but they've nailed everything else on your list. So I would say the easiest one on that list, I'd put product at number 5. And the reality is, Francesco, is that there's lots of businesses who do the same things, right? In where we are in Lancashire, there's multiple law firms, there's multiple accounting firms. Does that mean you shouldn't go and set one up? No, it doesn't. Like, just go and do some of the other stuff better, even if you can't change the product. So products is number 5, definitely, without a doubt. That's the easiest one. Let's box that one off. So of the other four, I'm gonna. My gut feeling is culture's number 1, right? Culture eats everything else for breakfast.
Okay.
Yeah. So for me, yeah. So there'll be some people listening to this who are one-man band businesses going, well, that's nonsense. It's sales and marketing because they're on their own and they haven't got people and therefore there's no culture. But I'm looking at this through the lens of maybe a slightly more established business that has people and the way they do things. And so I'd go culture number 1, product number 5. And in the middle, I would go sales number 2, marketing number 3, and then operations number 4.
So why would you put sales over marketing?
Because the great thing about sales as an entrepreneur, if you can learn it, it's a no-cost way to grow in. Whereas with marketing, like at some point to get directly to your consumers and people, you're going to have to spend cash. So if you're a bootstrapped startup or scale up business, then marketing comes at a cost. Now, don't get me wrong, marketing is critically important. We invest a lot of time and effort into our marketing here as a sales-led organization, but we are sales-led, and for me, marketing is one to many broadly, although it's becoming more personalized and more direct, and I think it is. Marketing owns more of the sales and marketing funnel than it used to maybe 10, 15 years ago. Whereas I think if you take the traditional sales and marketing funnel, the marketing bit was a shorter level of engagement and sales was longer. And I think that has on one hand, marketing is a longer part of the process. And when you just look at that as a diagram, but equally, the average B2B sales process is 2.5 times longer than it was 5 years ago. So people are also hanging around in the sales part for longer than they were before, and you can spend all the money in the world on marketing, Francesca. You can go full out on marketing budgets and drive a load of stuff into your business, and if your sales function, whether that's just you or whether you have a team, cannot convert those opportunities, every penny you just spent on marketing is wasted.
That makes so much sense. It's like, this is not my domain, but the way you explain it just makes absolute sense. It's like a no-brainer.
And of course, there'll be some people listening to this who they've got a consumer-based product where it's a low-value, high-volume product. In that situation, marketing would come ahead of sales because you are marketing directly to consumer. It's a transactional purchase. It's low-value, high-volume. In that situation, marketing first, sales second. But in a in anything that's higher value, lower volume, and is not just e-commerce, then for me, you have to be able to sell. Otherwise, you're wasting some of your investment on marketing.
Hmm. And for someone who wants to get into sales, what is the best way to get started? Would you recommend that person going to an MBA course, buy a course, or simply do the reps, buy a book? How would you guide them to enter this industry?
So I definitely wouldn't recommend any academic qualifications currently.
For sure.
I think that's changing though. I mean, in the UK we have the ISP, which is the Institute of Sales Professionals. I would go and engage with them. They have it's a very low barrier to entry. You can do ethics exams. You can do they can point you down almost like a sort of an apprenticeship kind of type route in sales, which exists. And I guess ultimately for me, sales, if it's something that you want, that you really feel like you want to do, and I think most people, from a career perspective, and I've asked the question a lot of times in rooms with salespeople. I've asked the question, was this plan A for you while you were at school? And not a single person ever puts their hand up and says, yeah, when I was 15, I sat down with a careers officer at school and told them that I wanted to be in sales. And here I am.
No way.
No, everyone's got a story about what they did before they ended up in sales. And the key word there is ended, right? They just ended up in sales. So, and I was the same. I left school at 16 to pursue a professional golf career. That didn't work out. And I ended up in sales. So what did I do back then? It was a long time ago. I guess I found the lowest barrier to entry sales role that I could, where if somebody would take a risk on me, not knowing whether I'd be any good, which generally means kind of obviously a lower salary because there's a risk for the employer. So my first sales job was actually working in the motor trade. I sold cars for the first 2 years that I was a professional salesperson. So you can do that. There's graduate recruitment schemes as well, where you can get into sales through graduate sales recruitment as well. So there's various avenues into it. But I think there are a lot of employers now who are willing to bring younger salespeople in and develop them. I think they've realized that they have to do that. They can't just rely on the talent that's already in the market. So I think if you really want to get into sales, there's definitely some self-development you can do for free. So you jump on YouTube. You could sit on YouTube for months and still not consume all of the sales education that's on YouTube.
Absolutely.
Completely free. Like we also have our own free online academy at Sales Geek, which people can access. It's completely free. There's hundreds of videos on there as well, which is in our own academy.
Oh, nice.
So and that's again, we can't change the way the world perceives sales unless we make a sales education more accessible. So we're putting our money where our mouth is, and we've invested a lot of money in that platform, and we make it free for people to go and access. So there's lots of free access to content. So go and learn in your own time, show some initiative, go and learn in your own time, and then go and get a job in sales. Like I know it sounds like a really obvious thing to say, but just go and get a job in sales and be okay that you might not like it. You might go and do that and find out you don't want to be in sales. You might go and love it, like I did. I just loved sales. I loved engaging with people. I love learning about people. I love learning about people's lives. Like I loved it from the get go. But also, I loved it because I felt like coming from from quite a poor working class background, I felt like that without a university qualification, I felt for me that this was an opportunity to achieve something in my own life as a young guy back then, and it has absolutely given me that. I've before starting my own business, I've been in roles with salaries that I could only have dreamed of as a young guy. I've traveled around the world. I've kind of had all the perks that go with it, and sales gave me that, and it's an amazing career choice for people. It's just a shame that it currently for most young people it's not their first choice.
No, I feel you. And do you have a book that you really like that would you recommend anyone who wants to get in sales to read?
So there's a lot of sales books out there. There is a lot of sales books out there. So I'll make a couple of recommendations. So the first ever sales book that I read, and I'm not sure whether it's still in circulation or not, is a book called Hope is Not a Strategy by an American guy called Rick Page. does exactly what it says on the tin, and you realize when you read that book as a salesperson how many times you give up your sales process to hope that you really hope the other person's going to do the thing you want them to do. So that's a great book. I really like some of the simple books like Cold Calling for Chickens. So, like if you end up going into a sales role which involves prospecting and cold calling for chickens is brilliant. Eat That Frog's a great book. I know it's not just for salespeople, but in terms of like just get the hard things done early in the day. And I think as a salesperson, that is a book that's going to be helpful. But I think if I had to name one, and it's not a sales book, it won't come as any great surprise. There's a brilliant book called Surrounded by Idiots.
Right. Yeah, I know that one.
It's about basically disc profile. We have four well, not four different types of personalities, but with DISC, obviously you've got the DISC, and it helps you understand why you do the things that you do, why other people do the things that they do. And like I say, great salespeople are able to make amazing connections with other people. And I think to do that, there's two things you have to master. You have to understand yourself, and you have to understand the other people that are around you. And they could be customers, they could be teammates, they could be bosses, they could be colleagues in a wider business. And I think Surrounded by Idiots is such a great book in terms of understanding other people and their behaviors. And I think I would argue we can be guilty when we're younger of thinking that everyone thinks the same that we do. And the danger is that as a salesperson, you go and sell to people in the way that you want to be sold to. And you're probably going to alienate 80% of the people that you speak to if you go and do that. So go and learn about the other 80%, and that book will help you do it.
Nice. You said that you need to understand yourself and you need to understand others. Yeah. Two-part question. Is it more important to understand yourself or to understand others? And can you understand others without understanding yourself? What do you think?
Oh, that's deep.
That's the point of the podcast.
Yeah. Which one's more important? I think that's quite a close thing. And I think maybe the younger version of me would have jumped on that straight away and gone, oh, it's far more important to understand other people than yourself because you're selling to them. But I actually think in terms of having a long-term career and certainly getting into, because sales leads into sales leadership and senior roles in business and so on. I think the older I've got, the more I value understanding myself better, as well as becoming an expert in other people. But I think if I had to pick one, it's probably the other. In a pure sales role, is understanding other people. I think I'd go with that first. And I think the second part of the question was, well, how can you really understand other people? Well, for me, books like Surrounded by Idiots are great. That breaks down the a personality level, the sort of four primary types of personalities that exist, and how they learn, how they want to see information, how they tend to behave, how they react to the things that you put in front of them. That's massively, massively valuable. But also, I think getting a really basic, simple understanding in neuroscience and understanding, very simply how the brain makes decisions, the role of the emotional brain and the role of the logical brain, and those two things are really, really important, because most of us, most organizations, most salespeople, most founders will go around giving people lots of logical and rational reasons to go and buy their products and services. But actually, at the same time, science proves to us that most of our decisions are made in our emotional brain. I think even at a very basic level, understanding that, there's loads of content about that online. We just have to have the hunger to go and find it and want to learn and get better.
Fascinating. Right, let's change a bit to more business. As of early 2024, the UK had approximately 5.5 million small businesses, which constitutes 99% of all businesses. And then small and medium businesses consist of 60% of UK employment and about 52% of the private sector turnover. Considering that they are such an integral part of the economy, do you think the government is doing enough to help small business owners and encourages people to start a new business?
The short answer to that question is no, I don't think they do. And without getting too political about it, I have some quite strong views on this. But
you can get if you want.
I think my from the heart response to that is I think that large business and politics spend a lot of time holding hands. I think a lot of large business fund politicians and campaigns, and I think so. I think large businesses get a better deal, and I do think it's a slightly unfair playing field. If I'm being perfectly honest, I think that you get to a point in size, I think, as a business where if you've got the right connections and you can hand over enough cash, you can probably get whatever you need. Whereas the reality is, as a startup business, I started my business 8 years ago with 4 months worth of mortgage payments in the bank, and I didn't get any help from the government, that's for sure. I mean, the reality is, in that situation, they'll be clever with how they spin things, and they're back in the SMEs and stuff. But have I got much evidence over the last 8 years where I've had like government level support for my business? Not really. Most of the support for my business has come from the network that I've developed during that time, and other people who are in the same boat as me. So yeah, I don't think so. I think as an SME, I think as a startup, as a scale up, you've got to be 100% comfortable that there's no safety net. Right? There is, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Right? And it's a scary thing to go and do. It's a very vulnerable thing, I think, to go and do, to start a business, because with the world of social media and LinkedIn and stuff like that, if you go and do it and fail, your whole world, not the whole world, but your whole world is going to see that, and there's no one there to bail you out. There's no government step in with that stuff. So I don't think that it is helped, and I think that even if you look at things like corporation tax, you can be a small business generating a few £100,000 worth of profit, and you're paying the same percentage corporation tax as a large business making millions of pounds worth. Like, how's that fair? Like, it's just not fair. And the reality of an SME that's doing that and generating that level of profit, it's not got shareholders that are buying yachts and third homes in New York and southern Spain. Like, it's people that are feeding their families, putting their kids through school, creating jobs in their local business communities, and they're real human beings. They're not executives. So yeah, I think there is a level of propaganda to say that they really care about small business, and it is the cornerstone of the British economy. And actually, they're right, it is, but I don't think it gets treated that way personally. And I think large business and their ability to fund some politicians and political parties and stuff means that they probably get a bit more of what they want. So.
And you have all these, so the millionaires are fleeing the UK, then the small business owners are not encouraged to stay here and open a business, because then what is the other option is wage slavery. So then what is going to become of the economy? I'm starting to think, because it just does. I don't want to be the doom and gloom guy, but the people who should be encouraged the most are the small business owners. And yeah, I haven't had any support really, as you just said.
So yeah, I mean, I think that said, like, so I'm obviously I share my opinions on that, and I do hold those opinions, but I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, if I'm honest. And I think I'm a great believer in control the controllables, and
of course,
to give you an idea, I stopped watching the news 13, 14 years ago. I don't read.
That's wise.
Yeah, I don't read newspapers. I don't have 24-hour news on the background. I used to every day. I used to read the news apps on the way into London. I'd read the Metro newspaper on the way out of London. If I was working from home, I'd have 24-hour news on the background, and I used to allow it to affect my outlook on life. And what I've realized is that although at any point in time there is going to be suboptimal conditions, and even in the 8 years since I set up the business, I set up the business in the immediate aftermath of the Brexit referendum, and then had 2 or 3 years of sorting that mess out. And then, with a couple of prime ministers, and then COVID hit, and we had that cast. When COVID hit, 100% of my income was predicated on an employed member of my team physically sat in a room with somebody, right? When COVID hit, so that was like boom, smash, go home, can't service clients. Some of them migrated onto Teams and Zoom, but as bizarre as it sounds, back in 2020, that wasn't the go-to thing for people to do. They wanted to meet in person, and then you had the record levels of inflation coming out the back of it. We've had wars in different parts of the world. Like it's been a chaotic 8 years, and yet we've still grown and scaled, and we've performed because we've just focused on the things that we can control. And there's always going to be stuff in life that that you cannot affect and you cannot impact. And I think for me, keeping your thoughts and your mindset close to home, close to who you are and what you do, and impacting the things you can impact is far more valuable than wasting any brain space at all on what some politicians said in government yesterday, or what's happening in another part of the world, because we're just over. It's mad. Like when you go back 30 years ago,
It's too much.
yeah, I mean, 30. I think about like my dad's in his 70s, right? So when my dad was my age, and so about 30 years ago, my dad wouldn't have had a clue what was going on in the next town, let alone the next continent or the other side of the world. Like they wouldn't have known about that earthquake in Southeast Asia. Wouldn't have known about someone getting stabbed in Paris. Like but we're just bombarded with it all the time now, and it's just not good for you. And I think as a professional, whether you're in a sales career, whether you're an entrepreneur, the more time you can spend with like just tunnel vision for chunks of that career, chunks of that business journey, just laser focused on what you're doing, and just almost pretending that the rest of the world doesn't exist for parts of that journey. I think it's a really valuable skill, actually, in the mad, crazy world that we live in these days.
No, that's good advice for sure. For sure. You also talk a lot about startups.
Yeah.
In your opinion, so I'm gonna hit you with another statistic here. Sorry to
I
bore you.
Hey, I'm a geek. I love stats.
So it's over half of the small businesses, which is 56% of business owners, report experiencing poor mental health in the past year, with common issues including anxiety, depression, and loneliness. I think this is about 2023 statistics. Why would someone start his own business, let alone a startup, which is even more difficult because how unstable and uncertain they are? Why would someone in the right mind even go into that path? What is rewarding about it, in your opinion?
Yeah, so those stats don't surprise me at all. And as a business owner myself, I get that. It can be a lonely place at times, and it is difficult. But the assumption is that the alternative doesn't also attract the same issues. And I think back 8 years ago, the job I left behind, I was a global sales director for a $300 million North American PLC. I was 32 years old, and no matter how many challenges I've had in my business journey in the last 8 years, like I had all of the same challenges there, and I wasn't in control of it. I was at the mercy of somebody else making decisions. Like for me, the great thing about running your own business is it's not a silver bullet. I think that I'm always very honest with people when they say, "Oh, I'm thinking about doing my own thing." I'm like, do you know what? You should. You absolutely should. Here's some of the challenges. Here's some of the problems, and you got to be tough as hell, right, to get through this. But I think you got to be tough as hell to be successful in a career if you want to get to a senior level in a decent sized business. I actually think that's harder. And yeah, it's lonely, but it's lonely because less people do it. And you've got an idea, and I think often entrepreneurs think differently and behave differently. Therefore, I think the loneliness thing is quite a normal thing because we just act and behave differently to other people, and therefore we see the world differently. And there's not
Facts.
Yeah, there's not a lot of us around, right? By comparison, most people will do the normal thing. They'll go to school, they'll get a job, they'll get a mortgage, and they'll just work until they retire and then go and retire. And because from the minute we're old enough to understand what we've been told, that's the pathway that most of us get laid out ahead of it. So when you get to a point in your life, whether you're in your teens, your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, and you start considering the alternative, you've got to break down 20, 30, 40 years of social conditioning to go and get out of your own way and go and do that.
Yes.
And that's hard. I think that's hard for people, and I get it because ego gets in the way. We're terrified about, okay, what might I lose if it goes wrong? And let's be fair, it's usually a house or a car or something that no one's going to give a shit about by the time, sorry for my language, but by the time you're 6 feet in the ground, no one's going to care about that house and that car, but they might have cared about the impact you had through the business that you didn't start. So for me, yeah, it is tough, but it's like anything in life, like choose your tough. Choose your own hard. Right. So starting a business is hard, but so is not starting a business and regretting it when it's too late to do it. So choose your hard. Right. Being fat is hard and being fit is hard. It's just two different types of hard. It's the same with being in business or being in a career, in my opinion.
And you can always go back if it doesn't work,
Yeah.
especially if you start from a I'm broke position. You can always go back to that or to whatever job you had, like a normal. So I can always, like me, I just started the podcasting right now. I am at the same time working as a restaurant manager. If I quit the restaurant manager job and podcasting doesn't work out, I can always go back and do it.
100%.
I didn't lose much, but I'm going to regret not starting this.
Exactly right. And I know it's the old cliche, we regret the things we don't do. And that is true. And I think the other thing as well, for people that have worked in jobs for a period of time and then go and start their own business, the thing you have to accept is you've left one set of stresses behind, and you've now opened yourself up to a new set of stresses that you didn't have to deal with before. And although you might not like the old ones, you got used to dealing with them, and now you've got a whole bunch of new ones, and you're going to have to learn to get used to those. They're not any better or any worse. They're just different, and you just have to adjust to your circumstances. And like anything in life, sometimes people take longer to adjust than others. And I've seen that firsthand with other peers and people that have been on a startup journey. And as a business ourselves, so we're a franchise organization. We've got over 50 franchisees now across UK, US, India, and each one of those franchises are startups. And so I see that journey with our franchisees as well. And it's just new, and you have to learn to deal with the new stresses. But once you get into it and get into your groove of it, for me, it's been amazing. It's the best thing I ever did. It doesn't mean it hasn't been hard. It doesn't mean I haven't had dark moments during that time and doubted myself or what we're doing. But that would have happened if I'd have been in my job. I still would have had fear just about different things. So kind of take, as I say, pay your money, take your choice, right? So.
No, I think that's quite relatable. I think people will relate with your story, and hopefully will inspire them to take action.
I hope so. I think that my biggest, the thing I hate the most in life is unfulfilled potential, and that's why I love training, right? And the thing that we do, because we kind of fix that a bit. But even in other people, and I think that comes from like this comfort crisis that we're living in. I know one of your previous guests talked about that, and I've read the same book, and it's a great book, and it's so true. Like life's almost too easy for us now, so therefore we find other things to get stressed about and anxious about. And the best cure for anxiety is to move towards a problem. Like it's not doing nothing. Doing nothing makes it worse. Like so to like step towards the problem, and actually weirdly anxiety goes away. But that whole comfort crisis thing I think is at the root cause of people finding it even harder to be entrepreneurial, right? And go and take the risk and go and do that thing because they're just used to things being all right.
We're too soft. We've become too soft.
Yeah. Whereas I think if you've got nothing to lose, you see that with even in certain sports, like most successful boxers come from very poor. Like they've got nothing to lose. These guys, they don't care that they're going to get their head filled in because they've got nothing to lose. And I think
exactly.
Most, not all, but a lot of entrepreneurs generally haven't got any generational wealth in their family. They don't. So therefore they've got nothing to lose. So they just go for it and find a way to start and then just hang in there and battle through because they don't have an alternative.
That's why most millionaires are self-made, because they come from nothing and they're hungry for it. Because once you're cozy, if you're born in money, you're like it doesn't matter anymore, or not as much at least.
Completely agree. Yeah, and I think the other thing I'll just add on that, last thing would be, I don't think you have to have all the answers in order to start either. I see so much procrastination goes on. People thinking that they need to know every last little thing before they go and do a thing. And I think actually, like, embrace naivety. Like, it's okay. And there's an amazing quote by one of the people that I follow and love the most, like you do with Alex. For me, it's a guy called Ross Edgley. He's got a great book called The Art of Resilience. He was his time around Great Britain back in 2016. This guy's absolutely incredible. Inspired me to go and run my first marathon last year. And he has an amazing quote, which is he said that sometimes in life you need to be naive enough to start and stubborn enough to finish. And it's so true. Like, just don't think you have to have all the answers and know everything in order to actually get out the starting blocks. But equally, once you do start, be stubborn and hang on and just like get the grit and see it through.
Exactly. Talk to me about the power of storytelling. What role does storytelling play in sales?
It's everything.
It's everything.
Yeah, everything. And again, it's something that people are really bad at. I think, go to your question right at the beginning about the things that people get wrong. That's one of them. They go out and they use facts and figures and they try and give lots of logical and rational reasons why people should buy their stuff. And as humans, we don't buy on logic and rationale. We buy on emotion, and stories are the way to create that emotional connection with you as a person, you as a brand. We remember stories. The brain is engineered to remember stories. It doesn't remember facts and figures, but it remembers stories. We've been telling each other stories around campfires for 12,000 years. And for me, that is, again, another great skill that good salespeople have is the capacity to be creative and take, what somebody else would call a USP and turn that USP into an anecdote or a story, and therefore just make it far more valuable and far more connecting for the people that they're trying to speak to. So for me, again, it's a massively undertaught skill in sales and in business generally, actually.
Yeah. What is it? Apple and Nike are some of the best examples for this. What those ads sell you is a sense of shared identity with the person using the product rather than the product itself. Like Nike doesn't boast in the ads of we use this material and that material is like, no, it just shows you how people go from the impossible and do the possible to just do it. Like, the underdogs, how they make it, and they try and make you associate and relate with that person. Like, I can do too. I can run a marathon. I was like, oh, if all of the graphic designers are using MacBook, me as a graphic designer, perhaps I need to use a MacBook as well. Like, you don't see any Windows laptop, such as Razer or, I don't know, Dell, or whatever is out there. They try and make the specs the center of the ads, whereas Mac or Apple tells you almost nothing. It doesn't matter. It's underspec. It's underspec compared to any other PC, and yet it sells the most because of the storytelling aspect.
Yeah, and global brands leave clues for SMEs that they should follow, and I think often we can be bad at following them. But I think that what I find fascinating is even when I think the easiest way of putting it is I think most people, when it comes to business, they want to know the what and the how. Like, what should I do and how should I do it? What should I do and how should I do it? But actually, the who and the why are far more important. The why is the storytelling piece, and the who, like you said, is actually speaking to, and very specifically speaking to an audience. And I think you mentioned obviously Apple and Nike. They're amazing at both the why piece and also the who piece. And I think other great brands, and maybe not so much globally recognized, but even in the UK, as brands like I think about Marks and Spencers, right? They're famous for their Christmas advert every year, where they do this amazing story, and it'll have no resemblance to any product that they sell, but it's them living their values every year, and it'd always be this kind of like hype and this build up to it. And the first one they did was they told the story from the First World War of when German and Allied troops got out of the trenches and played football together on Christmas Day, and that actually happened. And they played that story. It's the most heartwarming thing that in the middle of this chaos and blood and gore and this horrible world event that happened, that actually they united around the day, and B, love of football. And every year since then, they've launched just before Christmas. They launched the advert. John Lewis and Marks and Spencer's kind of both do it, and they don't sell products and they don't sell services now. They just telling to the world, this is what we stand for, and it's our way of demonstrating it. And yeah, I think small businesses might make the mistake of thinking that is only the domain of large businesses, but you can absolutely replicate that yourself. Like the production costs for doing things like that these days have fallen through the floor by comparison. Thanks to social media, thanks to AI, you can through a mobile phone create video and story assets very cheaply, very cost effectively, and distribute them to thousands of people for free. And yet most people don't do it.
Yeah.
It's mad. It's absolutely mad. Most people don't do it.
As you just said that, I was thinking I am a customer of Simmer Eats. Do you know Simmer Eats?
Yeah, I've heard of
It's a
something.
UK company. I just received the parcel yesterday, and I remember I bought the product only because the ad had this storytelling component of, oh, we are two brothers from immigrant families, and then COVID happened and this, and they kind of videotaped the journey. I was like, that's so cool. Let me check it out. What these two guys accomplished by themselves. I'll order one. I can always cancel it.
Yeah.
And now I stayed as a customer. So it's all storytelling, man. You're right. You're right. For someone who wants to improve in sales,
Yeah.
how can someone distinguish between telling a story and pitching? Because I would assume you want to do more of the former and less of the latter.
Yeah, so one of the slogans we have in this business is "Don't say pitch to rich." I hate the concept of pitching. I really do. Like, I hate it.
Mhm.
And so many people, they try and refine this perfect. They think there's something that's like called a perfect pitch. It just doesn't exist. Our ability to understand the other person is far greater than our ability to articulate what we do in 30 seconds. I don't think there's any real value in doing that. So for me, it should always be other person first. Seek to understand, seek to learn more about them than they learn about you. You know, if you're in a sales conversation in any capacity, you should leave that conversation knowing far more about them than they know about you. Whereas most salespeople go into it, with a slide deck, with a pitch, with a load of stuff, and they're not satisfied unless they've absolutely drowned the other person in a load of facts and figures and compelling reasons why they should buy from them, their company, their whatever, and actually leave knowing very little about the other person. It should be the complete other way around. However, when that person has got questions and they start being inquisitive about the business and the product and the service, having this weaponry, this arsenal of amazing little kind of anecdotal stories that bring those responses to life are really, really valuable. So for newer salespeople, that might be harder because they might have less of their own stories. They might have to steal some of those stories from other people around the organization. That's fine. Go and do that. But as someone that's been in your field, in your profession for a while, you've probably got those stories. They're in there. They're in their head. The memories are there. You just don't use them as a tool, as an asset. And they really are. Like, people remember stories. The human brain, like I said earlier, it is wired to do it. And the science behind that's really simple. Like, every time we go to bed at night, the human brain takes stuff from the short-term memory and puts it in the long-term memory, but not everything. It doesn't keep everything. And the thing that it uses to decide whether it keeps it or not is how much emotion is attached to that memory. So if it's a memory that doesn't have much emotion to it, it just lets it go. It's obviously not important to you. Whereas if it's a memory with emotion attached to it, it keeps hold of it. And stories create those emotions, because when we tell somebody a story, they feel it. Sometimes they put themselves in that story. Sometimes they will align it to something that's happened in their life or in their work. And it creates such a much deeper level of connection with other people. And that's why, 12,000 years ago, when we lived in tribes, we sat around campfires and we told stories to build rapport, to bond this tribe. And our brains haven't changed that much.
They don't. They haven't.
They haven't.
And that makes so much sense, because we tend to remember traumatic events more vividly than non-traumatic because they're emotionally charged, as you just said.
100%. Like, I often use, when I talk to people about this at speaking gigs and at events, I'll always ask the question, like, there'll be 100 people in a room, and I'll say, who remembers where they were on September the 11th, 2001? Right, and 100% hands go up in the room, and then you ask people questions, and they remember, like, where they were when they saw those planes go into those towers in New York. They remember the day, where they were, who they were with, what TV they were watching on, what happened the rest of the day. I have to be careful if it's a younger audience, because maybe they weren't old enough to remember. But for anyone that's kind of like in their 30s upwards, most people will remember vividly that day and what happened. Equally, if I just chuck out a random day, like, where were you on the 5th of July 2008? God, right? Because nothing happened. Now, I got married that day, so I remember it very, very well. But for most other people, it was just probably a pretty boring Saturday afternoon, and they don't need to remember it. So that's how the brain prioritizes what's important to us. So as a salesperson, you can create Being memorable, I think, again, is another undervalued skill, because often, as a salesperson or even as a business owner who is also a salesperson, sometimes sales can come down to timing, often you can speak to somebody, they might need what you do, but just not now. So, but then when the timing is right, you want to be the person or the business or the brand that's right at the top of their list to go, oh yeah, we've got a sales issue now. We're going to get Sales Geek in. I really like that Richard guy from Sales Geek. We're going to get him in. And that might be 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years down the line. And I think that often gets missed in sales. That timing is everything. And if the timing isn't right, being memorable becomes really important.
Right. And part of storytelling, which people might not think as well, is anything you do about your personal branding. As I was going through your LinkedIn, I saw your marathon thing, and that is part of storytelling. That is part of you conveying your values. There you go, showing off the medal, showing off the medal. Right, so you recently made the news as the man who completed the marathon with one lung. Well done, by the way.
Thank you.
Why did you choose to run this marathon? Why put yourself under such strain, considering you're in such a disadvantage? What do you get for pushing yourself to do hard things?
So, yeah, it's a good question. So I've completed 3 marathons now,
Wow.
and one of those was off-road up some very big hills as well, which is quite tough. But I've done London Marathon twice now. This Sunday was my second go with it. And yeah, I entered the marathon for the first time. I was in the middle of training. I was doing a hike for charity, and I was actually listening to Ross Edgley's book, The Art of Resilience. And in the first chapter in that book, he talks about how quick we are as humans we categorize ourselves, and we say we create our own. So you will have a vision. You've got an image of yourself and who you are, what you stand for, what you're good at, what you're not good at, and you have your own stereotype of yourself. And often we use that then to create limits and what we choose to do, what we choose not to. And when I was training for that hike, I just retired from rugby. I played rugby for about 20 years, loved the sport. I was just about to turn 40, body was giving up. And I knew it was time to step out of the game. And a game that I loved, a game that gave me my sanity, gave me friends, it gave me connection to something outside of business and work. It was my sanctuary, and I knew I needed something else to replace it. And when I listened to that chapter of that book, I thought, you know what, I've always categorized myself because I'm 100 kgs, ex-rugby player with one lung. Literally, the thing that I am the worst at is running long distances. I mean, it's my Achilles. It was my Achilles heel when I was playing rugby as well. I hated running. I was rubbish at it, and I hated it. So I decided to go and do the thing that I was least good at,
Nice.
and that was it. It was as simple as that, And I felt like I wanted to prove myself wrong. I'd always told myself, I certainly once had my lung removed 17 years ago. I told myself that some of these things were out of my reach now, and I felt like if I could prove myself wrong, I'm going to benefit from that as a human, as a man, but also that might inspire some other people to maybe, if they're using something as a reason to not go and do something at the minute, maybe they can. And for me, I think I had a pretty good excuse to not go and run a marathon, and now I've gone and run 3 of them. So just get out of your own way, man.
Oh, that's inspiring because you are the only you are like the one person who shouldn't do it, yet you've done it. So
yeah,
that's good. That's great mindset. Yeah.
It goes back to the whole comfort crisis thing, right? The easiest thing for me to do would not do that. And it's running a marathon isn't like Sunday was hard because it was warm in London as well, and that came as a shock to the system because I've been training in like single figure degree temperatures, and all of a sudden it's 23, 24 degrees in the center of London. It was hard. But also, it's an amazing day. It's a victory lap for what is 5 months worth of running 4 times a week, strength training once a week, sacrifices, spending money on equipment. Like 4 or 5 months of doing that to just go and run around London with a few people cheering you on. Like
Worth it.
It's hard, but it's worth it. And I think by doing hard things, and I made a commitment to myself 2 years ago actually to do more hard things, and I have 3 marathons. I've done 42 mountains in 3 days in the Lake District. I've done the Yorkshire 3 Peaks twice in a day. Like and I know when I go and chase these things down, I'm happier and healthier as a result. And the other things in life that maybe might cause stress and anxiety, don't anymore because they're not as big. Because actually, when you go and do hard things, it distracts you brilliantly from the other things that we just then find our way to get anxious and stressed about. So,
Sure.
yeah, I think doing hard things is a very quick, not easy, but I think it's a really good way to better well-being and mental health is to just go and pick something that
Mhm.
you're nervous about whether you can even do it or not, and just go and commit to it for a few months with a bit of discipline, and you might amaze yourself at what you're capable of.
Certainly. Right, Richard, last question. What do you want to be remembered for?
I would like to be remembered for doing some of the hard things that I've done with my disability, but also proving that nice people can do well in business as well, and that you don't have to be an asshole to be successful in life.
That's nice. No, I do think I got this feeling, and I'm not trying to flatter you. I got this feeling as you were talking that you must be a great employer. Like, it's like I would be happy to work for you if this was my domain. Like, not only you know your things, but you sound as if you are someone who would give good guidance and leadership. So, that's all I can. If I can tell that from one conversation, I'm sure it stands true in real life as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that means a lot. I mean, I really cherish the guys that we have here in the team. And really respect that some of these guys have taken a risk on us as well as a scale up business. Some of these guys have left some very good jobs in some very stable businesses, and for me, we borrow them from their families for 40 hours a week or whatever, and we do our best to look after them and return them back to their families in hopefully better condition than we found them. So
That's such a good frame. We borrowed them from the families. So you have to give them more respect. So you have to take care of them. Oh, that's such a nice frame.
This is why we have, so behind me, and there's another wall to the side here. These are the guys, their partners, their kids, their dogs, their pets. There's, we want them to bring their whole selves to work. And this is one of the ways in which we do it. So on both sides of these walls here, we have our sort of family walls, really. So there's all sorts of pictures on that walls of chihuahuas, and my bulldogs are on there, my son's on there, pigs on there, horses, all sorts of stuff.
Oh, I'm gonna steal that. Sorry, but I'm not even asking. I'm gonna steal that. That's awesome. Richard, thank you very much, man. You've been fantastic.
It's been great fun. Thank you very much for having me.
And last before, where can people find you? What's the best way? Is it your website? Where do you want all the traffic to go?
Well, the best way to find me is LinkedIn. That's kind of my other home when I'm not here. So LinkedIn, obviously, feel free to check us out at salesgeek.world. But if anybody wants to connect with me personally, just search me up on LinkedIn and feel free to connect and start a conversation there.
Nice. Thank you, Richard.
Awesome. Thank you.